Hello everyone. Now you're going to hear a short recap of the film Bound. This was the first film by the Wachowski brothers. Their next project was The Matrix. Violet and Caesar, a couple, entered an elevator with a woman, Corky, already in it. The ladies admired each other and Corky also checked out the stranger's arse. It turns out that they lived in an apartment next to the one where Corky was hired to do repairs. The sound insulation was poor and she could distinctly hear moaning behind the wall. Corky was covered in dirt as she blew a drain in the bathroom, but Violet didn't mind. She offered her neighbor a cup of coffee. Violet asked Corky to not turn the tools on too early because the walls were very thin. The girls flirted and stared at each other. Violet invited the interlocutor to return the coffee cup next time. One evening Corky went to a lesbian bar called the Watering Hole. It turns out that she recently got out of prison, after serving there for 5 years, and went there to pick someone up. She had almost found a suitable match for the night, but the policeman drove her away from Mademoiselle. Dissatisfied, she returned to her room. A new working day was interrupted by a phone call. The landlord asked Corky to do some work in the apartment next door. Violet called her. She dropped an earring down the sink drain. The mistress got the earring again and now would like to thank her savior. For instance, they could have a bottle of beer. Corky, am I making you nervous? Asked Violet. No, rather interested, replied Corky. Violet was also interested. After stroking Corky's tattoo, she showed Corky her own tattoo right on her chest. Why shouldn't Corky feel it? Wondered Violet. After licking Corky's finger, she offered to let her feel something else between her legs. The girls got excited, but their sex was interrupted unexpectedly by the returning Caesar. He already started yelling when he saw his disheveled wife and a hard worker, but calmed down when he noticed that the worker was a woman. It meant everything was fine. She did not cheat. The man was aware of who Mr. Bianchini was hiring and asked how long the hard worker had served. Respectable people lived there, and in order not to offend Caesar, she took his money for work. After that, Corky immediately left the neighbors. Having finished with the repairs for the day, she was about to leave, but Violet came over to her. She apologized for what she didn't have time to do to her. The ladies kissed and went to Corky's apartment to spend the night together. Finally, Corky had let off some steam. Violet told her that her man is a mobster involved in money laundering. They have been together for 5 years. Corky did the same amount of time for robbery. The next day she came to work in a good mood until it was spoiled by a rude person who came to Violet. She heard her moaning behind the wall again. It became an excuse to have an argument. Although sex with men was just a job for Violet, Corky left her upset. The next day, serious people drove up to the house. A gangster in a crimson jacket led a frightened brute out of the car. While working, the girl heard Johnny hitting Shelley in the toilet and drowning him in the same place. Caesar didn't like the man yelling loudly and ordered him to put a towel in his mouth. Violet couldn't stand bloody fights and wanted to go somewhere, but the gangster wouldn't let her go. Another gangster, Mickey, had a soft spot towards her and said that she better leave. Johnny was a real psychopath. He was already tired of beating Shelley. Mickey had his own method to find out where the Mafia's money had gone. He asked him one question and then cut off his one finger. Violet decided to hide from this cruelty at Corky's place. Together, they went to the bar. Violet revealed that Shelley stole money from the family and tried to persuade her to leave with him yesterday. In the end, he never escaped. She didn't want to make the same mistake. Violet needed another life, but she could not leave alone. She planned to steal the Mafia's money. Caesar was going to bring the $2 million that Shelley stole to the apartment for recalculation. Corky was an experienced thief and her skills would come in handy, but did the women trust each other enough to go for such a desperate deal? Meanwhile, there was a problem with the money. When Shelley got them out of the cash, Johnny shot him, splattering both the money and Caesar with blood. He punched Johnny's face for this. Now the bills needed to be cleaned somehow. The boss would come for them the next day. Caesar washed the blood-stained money and hung the banknotes all over the apartment to dry. Later, he ironed them one by one. He carefully counted the money the entire night. They were then collected in a bundle and laid in a briefcase on his desktop. Johnny hates Caesar and Caesar hates Johnny, but he can't do anything about it, because he is the son of Gino Marzone, the head of the Mafia clan, and Corky believed that this operation could be done. According to the plan, before Caesar goes to pick up Gino at the airport, Violet would accidentally break Gino's favorite drink, and since Caesar takes the meeting of his boss very seriously, Violet would then run to get a new bottle. At this point she would open Corky's door. For backup, she would take a gun with her. She would then quietly sneak into the office and replace the money with newspapers. Then Violet would need to act again. When she gets home, she would convince Caesar that she saw Johnny driving downstairs and that he was alone in the car. Gino's plane would land only an hour and a half later. After opening the case, Caesar would realize that Johnny framed him up, but he cannot accuse him, he would only have to run, and other gangsters would think that he stole their money. Great plan, but how did such a smart girl get caught 5 years ago? Asked Violet. Her partner dumped her, said Corky. I won't do that, replied Violet. When Caesar opened the case, he felt sick, and immediately started blaming it on the thief Johnny for everything. Naturally, he couldn't tell Gino that his son stole the money, but he couldn't run away either, otherwise everyone would think he did it. Apparently, Gino himself would have killed him when he saw the newspapers instead of the money. Violet persuaded him to run away, but he asked her to leave him alone and let him think things through. Violet called Corky and complained that Caesar had lost his mind. Her partner advised her to pretend to be hysterical and somehow escape from the apartment, but Caesar had already figured out how to get the money back. They just needed to be taken away from Johnny. They would definitely be in his car, and he went to meet his father at the airport. Following the plan, Violet was about to leave, but Caesar pointed a gun at her. Now he wouldn't let her go. In case she dropped the bottle for a reason, it would be the perfect way to let Johnny in. He would like to believe her, but now he had no choice. Caesar put on a suit and waited for the Marzone family. A father and son and their bodyguard arrived at the apartment. Caesar greeted them cordially and even hugged Johnny, whose nose he broke the day before. He still suspected that he and Violet may be in cahoots. Gino Marzone decided to reconcile his son and the loyal gangster. The former must behave with dignity, and the latter must respect Johnny in the same way as he respected him. Corky hid the money in a bucket of paint. Gino wanted to leave already, but Johnny asked him to stay and now blamed Caesar for running over him in vain and punching him in the face. The gangster thought that he was playing with him and demanded Johnny to open the case. He tossed him the key and asked Violet to make him a drink. Johnny went nuts when he saw a pile of paper instead of money, and Caesar pointed a gun at him. Your son took the money and framed me. He stole them, I can prove it, exclaimed Caesar. He asked Violet to tell him everything. Johnny got up and was immediately shot in the leg. Gino was outraged that his subordinate pointed a gun at him and asked for the weapon to be handed over to him. But then Caesar made a desperate decision and shot the boss in the chest. The next bullet killed the bodyguard. Whatever was left in the drum, he fired at Johnny. Violet was shocked at how things didn't go according to plan. The gangster planned to find the money and dispose of the bodies somewhere. He would say that Marzone simply did not come there. Someone called the police because of the shots. While Violet was talking to the cops, Caesar dragged and stored the bodies in the bathroom. He covered the large pool of blood with a carpet and wiped the rest. After cleaning up, he played the movie at full volume. Caesar covered the bullet holes and advised Violet not to tremble. The police entered the apartment and immediately realized what was happening on the TV. Caesar apologized and claimed that he had just ran out of batteries in his hearing aid that day. The cops refused beer, but one of them asked to use the toilet. There were 3 bodies just half a meter away from the peeing man. The second policeman inspected the place and stepped on the blood-soaked carpet, but neither one of them noticed anything and left. Caesar searched the entire car, but the money was nowhere to be found. They got into it and drove off somewhere. Corky leaned over the money bucket and thought about it. Caesar arrived at Johnny's apartment and turned it upside down looking for the $2 million. The gangster rushed about and was freaking out. The money was nowhere to be found. He ended up sitting on his arse and cried. Violet asked him to leave, but instead Caesar called Mickey and told him that Gino Marzone never showed up and his son Johnny was not answering his calls. He also lied that he still had the money. The couple returned home. Caesar was about to get rid of the bodies, but Violet immediately called Corky. She was afraid that her partner would leave her. At that moment, Caesar entered the room and started questioning who the girl called. When he didn't get an answer, he pressed redial. The gangster thought that Mickey was on the other end. Without answering, Corky hung up and didn't pick it up again. Caesar began to torture Violet. Corky picked the lock to get into the apartment to help her. She was looking for her mistress with a gun in the dark, but the cold muzzle of a gun rested on the back of her head. "You? Holy Christ!" exclaimed Caesar. The girl tried to resist, but was beaten and tied up. Violet asked her not to tell where the money was hidden, otherwise he would kill her immediately. The man did not understand what she did if she had changed so much in just a couple of days. The gangster accused Violet of ingratitude. She was nothing before she met him, but she was just using him like he used her these 5 years. But that's all right, now he would cut their tongues out. Caesar had a good teacher and he found something to cut off her fingers with. Moreover, he would ask Corky questions and cut Violet's fingers. But the thief immediately admitted that the money was hidden in a paint bucket in the neighboring apartment. But before killing the neighbor, he needed to check. Caesar hid Corky in the dressing room and put her gun in the fridge while Violet was taken to the bathroom. Mickey drove up to the house and now Caesar was negotiating with Violet for her life so that she could help convince the gangster that everything was in order. Mickey did not wait for the door to open for him and entered with the bouncer himself. They were worried about Caesar. Johnny's apartment was trashed and he didn't answer the phone. At that time, Violet was trying to find something from the dead gangsters. Keys were not needed for Mickey to open the briefcase. He entered the apartment without a key. Caesar was about to put down 2 more, but then the phone rang. It was Violet, and she told him to lie and pretend that he was talking to Gino. They allegedly had an accident and were now in the hospital. The girl made a deal that she wouldn't turn him in if she got half the money and everyone stayed alive. The gangsters went to the hospital and Violet went with Caesar for the money. Corky tumbled out of the dressing room and found something to cut the rope with. The money was really hidden in buckets. Violet took advantage of the moment and ran away. Caesar chased after her, but couldn't bring himself to shoot her. She reached the first floor and took the lift back upstairs. Violet called Mickey and told him that Caesar had done something terrible and asked him to come back soon. The gangster himself barely crawled to his floor. Corky was untied, the money was gone. Caesar went after her, but the girl outsmarted him and attacked him, but Caesar fought back and beat her unconscious. However, he immediately found himself in the crosshairs of Violet. She told him about Mickey's call and offered him to run, but he didn't believe that she could shoot him. "Caesar, you don't know a damn thing," exclaimed Violet. However, Violet shot her former patron without batting an eye. Mickey was very partial to Violet and believed her that Caesar ran off with the money. Alas, she refused to stay with the gangster and only kissed him goodbye, but who she will be with is Corky. "Violet, you know what's the difference between me and you?" asked Corky. "No," replied Violet. "Me neither," said Corky.